All right, here we are live from paradise. Welcome, everybody. So, we keep going here on the cycle around the wheel, and we end up in the right angle cross of penetration. And we're going to start with profile 1.3 and 1.4. So, if you want to penetrate and you want the best penetrator, you can finally get to a cross of penetration. And you get right away that is there nothing on earth like them. They can penetrate anything. The difficulty of the psychology, the assumption is in penetration and that you can go further. And at the moment that you try to go further, they're out of their depth and they're in big trouble. If you have a cross of penetration that knows human design, that they're great, the hell what it's all about. You'll be so for them. They can open the door, they can take you through, they're great in sense, and that's their gift. But it's difficult for them to stop at just penetration. Here you get to the beginning of it, confusion. You get the gift of penetrating to the inner meaning that ensures timely action, the possibility of the intuition penetrating to the inner meaning. Basically, the inner meaning, don't confuse this. All that is that the penetrator knows the weak spot. The penetrator knows how to bring the hammer to find a fracture, but it's not going to polish the gem. It's going to do a terrible job. What it can fracture is just the right away that it's ready to be polished. Herein lies the confusion, and this confusion can overpower the intuition, the moon in detriment. So all penetrators are confused, and yet the 1-3 penetrator is wonderful. They can see the problem in the foundation. There are three underneath. They can crack that. Remember, they can really be anarchists. They can break down things open without having to replace anything. And if they stop there, that's what it's all about. This also tells you the way the spleen works. This is the penetrable splenic gate. It tells you how the spleen works. It's just the surface and nothing more. Alok and I yesterday were sitting in the restaurant. Alok is his friend. We both smoke hashish, and in Spain they don't care because except that they don't particularly like it to show to their straight clients. We're sitting in the restaurant, and two guys walk in the same suits with pink ties, and my intuition, my spleen in that moment goes, something's wrong. Just something's wrong. There's something's wrong. They're salesmen, and these guys walk in. They walk through, and my spleen does not think anything other than something's wrong. That's it. It penetrates, but it doesn't elaborate. It's not the mind, not at all. I've learned because I'm a splenic manifestor to trust my spleen when it does that. I knew. I said to Allah, there's something funny about these guys. These funny humans with the manager of the hotel. I knew, and I said to Allah, let's get up and get out of here. A few minutes later, the waiter comes over to us and said, just don't do it in here. Now my spleen knew like that, and my spleen also knew that this was not life and death. It was life and death, I tell you, without knowing it. I'll be jumping at the moment that I tell you that this was not life and death. I'll be jumping because I'm in my third cycle. I know my intuition is telling me something. I also know that we should get up. But in that moment that I told me, it does not tell me anything. It only penetrates. It doesn't deliver anything else. This is what you have to understand about the spleen. This is splenic awareness. Splenic awareness is very weak. It's the gentle breeze. It's the little hint. And if you're not sensitive to that, we're sensitive brief and you're going to get it. But the moment that you're sensitive to the gentle breeze, it's amazing to have a spleen. My mind says, I don't see what's so impressive about your spleen. I didn't tell what was going to happen, and it doesn't because I can't. I can only warn. So the whole thing about penetrators to see is that you can't go any further. There's nowhere to go. It's over the moment to break through, and in that lies their confusion. Now think about this in relationship. You don't want to have a relationship with one of these people because the way they get to you is they break the service and they can never go deeper. Now for some people that's okay. After all, I don't want to go deeper with somebody, but the way in which we're conditioned is that we think that there's this depth. And remember that the 57, as powerful as it is my look as this for 34, and the 10 and the 20, and it's looking that way. It's looking for a 28. The 57 doesn't want to be caught going up before it goes down. Only the 28 can make the 57 human. Only the 28 can bring out the 57 true partnership. Only the 28 can give purpose of partnership. Remember that the 57 opens up for integration. This is the basis of I am. I am here now. I'm surviving here now by my power through my behavior in my life now. And you can take any 57 and bring a 28 and then say I and them. And eventually it can even become me and you. But the only thing that humanizes individuality is the 28. The 28 is the 28. And when it's looking in the other direction, is simply a penetrator. Penetrate the surface, penetrate the surface, penetrate the surface. They think it's that they're in a meaning. I know somebody through my children at school, and it's a parent that has a very powerful social dynamics. The kind of person who superficially make contact with a lot of people with ease. And you can see the conditioning on the child to be exactly the same way. So it's a child that will say goodbye to every other child that it sees. This ability to just be able to penetrate the surface, and yet at the same time, the frustration that there's nothing below the surface because they're not real friendships. In fact, if you have somebody and say goodbye and they might nod or smile, does not actually mean that you have penetrated them to the point that you can go deeper into a relationship. And 57s have a very, very hard time in relationships. They just do. After all, if there is a 28, if you're fortunate enough to have a 28 in your design, and your 57 operates in a way that really alienates nature from bonding, that is integration. The only people that can really get to me to pay attention to them are people that either have the 28 or the 38. It's one of the things you learn about integration, that the 57 is transformed when it's forced to be in the individual circuit and just be involved in the empowerment business and so be able to empower the other. But without the 28 or 38 presence, and by the way, it doesn't have to be there as a definition. The 38 can just be there and do the same job. It's just not as easy because there are gaps. But the fact that the matter is that the other that the 57 says is very superficial and it isn't ready to get into those relationships. It's like me. I have a very, very hard because I'm a 57 orientated, and that my relation with the others always about that real depth. I understand people through technically. I see the design and know a lot. But my 57 just taking them in that splendid way, I capture something just like the guys coming through the door. There's no depth in that. I just gotta finish this off. There's just a surface recognition, and for me, that's for my 57 to other being. It's very much this flower flavor that I take in the moment, and it's mostly triggered by the acoustics what I hear. This is the gate of the right ear. Now think about that. Think about the telephone. The vast majority of humanity beings playing in the telephone because they're right-handed. They will pick up the telephone with their left hand and they will put it on the left ear. Right-handed people do this. Now, if you're listening out of the left ear, which is the 22nd gate, if you have a conversation on the telephone, you will only hear what you want to hear according to the mood that they're in. In other words, when you're in the wave. So somebody calls you and says, by the way, a friend of mine died, and that's a part of the conversation. Now, if you're down, in other words, when you wave, so the conversation, now you're down, you tune into the death part, even though you might not even know the person. If you're only to remember another part, it's only later in the week remember, oh, that person died. If you have the phone on the right here, you're no longer dealing with an emotional here. Your left ear is emotional. So your right is logical in the now. You hear everything that is said in the moment. So if you actually want to hear somebody on the telephone, put the telephone on your right ear. It helps. And if you're somebody like me who's a 57, one of the things I did in my career, that as an analyst, I always put people on my right, so I could hear them in the now instead of putting them on the left, which could have been partly totally different procedure. We would not have the same immediate effect on practice. So the 57 is really individual that appears on this thing of duality, and it says in there by itself, just at the 57, no, I'm not interested. Just at the 57, I'll penetrate people on the first furnace surface. That's it. What's going to do? But don't ask me to have a successful long relationship. I have to look after myself. And the only thing that I would change for the 57 is that the 57, but you can come into the channel of struggle. And it's only the channel of struggle with the pressure to purpose. Only that's going to turn the 57 from being a superficial penetrator into an empowering force, an empowerer of the archetype, an empowerer of the perfected form, an empowerer of existential correctness in the now. This whole business of seeing the way in which relating takes place. Remember, there's a real problem with being a penetrator. The problem is that because there is this illusion that one could go deeper, the fact that one go deeper is often very depressing. You're dealing with a melancholic individual chemical gas. In other words, you cannot separate relationship from melancholy. Sadness is something that emerges the moment that we're dealing with individuality. Isn't that amazing? Thank you so much, Ra. You're amazing. Great.